The sun was barely rising, casting a soft golden hue over the quiet suburban street. The sound of birds chirping mixed with the hum of early morning traffic. Lucia sat at the kitchen table, nervously smoothing the pleats of her school uniform. It was the first day of a new school year, and although she had been through this before, today felt different. Her mother, Clarice, bustled around the kitchen, preparing breakfast while glancing at Lucia every few minutes. "Are you excited, Mayomor?" Clarice asked, her voice gentle but carrying the weight of a deeper concern. Lucia nodded, biting her lip. "I am. But what if things haven't changed?" Clarice stopped and turned to face her daughter. She crouched down to Lucia's level, brushing a hand through her daughter's soft curls. "Things change when you decide to change them, Lucia. You're strong. You always have been." Her eyes were full of warmth and pride, but Lucia could sense the subtle urgency in her mother's words, a plea to hold on to that strength for what might lie ahead. Clarice kissed her on the forehead. "Just remember, no matter what happens, you're not alone. I'll always be here for you. And if anyone tries to make you feel small, they don't know how big your heart really is." Lucia smiled, though her stomach tightened. She clutched her backpack as if it could somehow shield her from the unknowns of the day ahead. At school, the building loomed large, bustling with kids reuniting and chattering about their summer vacations. Lucia walked through the entrance, her small hand gripping the straps of her bag tightly. The familiar sounds of lockers slamming and shoes squeaking on the linoleum floors brought back memories, some good, but lately, too many bad. "Lucia!" A shrill voice rang out from behind her. She turned to see Ana Clara, her bright blue eyes gleaming with that peculiar look she always gave Lucia, the one that made her feel invisible, even when she was standing right in front of her. Ana Clara's friends giggled behind her. "Love your hair today. Really big," Ana Clara smirked, twisting a strand of her own straight hair in mock admiration. Lucia froze. She knew this tone, the same one Ana Clara had used last year, laced with an undercurrent of cruelty that no one else seemed to notice, except her. Her cheeks flushed, but she forced a smile. "Thanks, Ana." "Yeah, you look just like—" "What was it, Clara?" One of the other girls chimed in, pretending to rack her brain. "Oh yeah, a cotton candy cloud." They burst into laughter. The knot in Lucia's stomach twisted tighter. It was only the first day, and already, the familiar sense of dread was settling in. But she couldn't let them see how much it hurt. Not again. So, she smiled weakly and walked toward her classroom, the sound of their laughter echoing in her ears. The classroom smelled of fresh paper and the sharp tang of dry erase markers. Lucia slid into her seat at the back, pulling out her notebook. As she was about to settle in, she noticed the name on the board, Ms. Regina. Her stomach sank. Ms. Regina was standing by her desk, arranging papers with precision. Her hair was pulled tightly into a bun, and her glasses sat low on her nose, giving her a stern, calculating look. Lucia remembered her from last year. Her cold indifference, her tendency to overlook Lucia's hand when it shot up for answers. The teacher had never said anything overtly mean, but it was the absence of acknowledgement that stung the most. The day began, and Lucia did her best to pay attention. She wanted so desperately to prove herself, to show that she was more than the quiet girl who sat in the back. But every time she raised her hand, Ms. Regina's gaze seemed to slide right past her. "All right, class." Ms. Regina's voice broke through Lucia's thoughts. "Group projects for today. I'll assign the teams." Lucia's heart raced. Group work was always a gamble. Sometimes she got lucky, but most times, she was paired with the kids who made her feel like an outsider. Today was no different. "Ana Clara, Jessica, and Lucia," Ms. Regina announced, her eyes barely flicking to Lucia before moving on. Ana Clara let out a dramatic sigh, leaning back in her chair. "Oh great, this is going to be fun," she whispered loudly enough for her friends to hear, earning more quiet giggles. Lucia's throat tightened, but she forced her legs to carry her over to the table where Ana Clara sat, scribbling something absent-mindedly in her notebook. Jessica shot Lucia a quick, uncomfortable glance before looking away, clearly hoping to avoid involvement in whatever Ana Clara was planning next. "So," Ana Clara began, leaning forward with a faux sweetness that dripped like honey. Since you're really good at, like, reading and stuff, maybe you can just do all the writing for us? She tilted her head with an innocent smile. Lucia's fists clenched under the table. She knew this game. If she did all the work, Ana Clara would take the credit, just like last time. I think we should all do our part, Lucia replied quietly, her voice steady but soft. Ana Clara's eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh, really? Well, if you insist. She exchanged a sly look with Jessica, then leaned in again. But make sure it's good, okay? We wouldn't want to look stupid. At home that evening, Lucia sat on the floor of her room, pencil in hand, drawing in the notebook her mother had given her for her birthday. Each stroke was meant to calm her, to take her mind off the knot that had settled deep in her chest. But today, even drawing wasn't helping. Her mother appeared at the doorway, watching her in silence for a moment. Querida, how was school? Lucia didn't look up. Fine. Clarice stepped inside, sitting on the edge of the bed. Fine, she repeated gently. I know that fine. Lucia paused, her pencil hovering over the page. Ana Clara, she's the same. Nothing's changed. Clarice sighed deeply, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. Did you stand up for yourself, like we talked about? I tried. Lucia's voice wavered, the frustration bubbling up. But it's like no one sees me. Ms. Regina just ignores me, and Anna, she's always making fun of me. I don't know what to do anymore, May. Clarice reached out, pulling Lucia into her arms. It's not your fault, my love. None of it is. People like Ana Clara, and even Ms. Regina, they don't know who you are. They don't know your worth. But what if I'm not strong enough? Lucia whispered, her voice breaking. Clarice pulled back, holding her daughter's face between her hands. You are stronger than you think, Lucia, and when the time is right, you will see that. You're not alone in this. We will get through it together, okay? Lucia nodded, tears brimming in her eyes, but not yet falling. She leaned into her mother's embrace, letting the warmth and safety wash over her, but deep down, the knot in her chest remained. The next day at school, Lucia sat quietly at her desk, avoiding eye contact with anyone. She kept her head down, hoping the day would pass quickly. But during lunch, as she was eating alone, something surprising happened. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Hey, Lucia. She looked up to see a girl she didn't recognize. The girl was small, with curly hair tied back in a neat ponytail and big brown eyes that seemed almost as unsure as Lucia felt. I'm Sophia. The girl introduced herself. I'm new here. Lucia blinked, unsure of what to say. Oh, hi. Sophia smiled shyly. Mind if I sit with you? Lucia hesitated for a second, then nodded. Sure. As Sophia sat down, the two of them shared a brief, awkward silence before Sophia spoke again. I've noticed how Ana Clara acts. She's not very nice, is she? Lucia felt a wave of relief. It was the first time someone had openly acknowledged what was happening. No, she admitted softly. She's not. Sophia gave a small nod, picking at her lunch. She's tried to be mean to me too. I just ignore her, but I know it's hard. Lucia looked at Sophia, surprised. There was something comforting about her presence, a shared understanding that Lucia hadn't felt with anyone else at school. Yeah, it is hard, Lucia murmured. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Let me know if this is good, and we can move on to the next chapter. Lucia walked into school the next morning with Sophia by her side. For the first time in a while, she felt a bit lighter. Having a friend, even one as quiet as Sophia, was a small but powerful comfort. They didn't need to say much, but just knowing someone was with her helped push away the overwhelming feeling of loneliness she had carried. As they made their way to class, Ana Clara's voice pierced through the morning chatter. Look who it is. Ana Clara called out, her mocking tone unmistakable. Lucia and her new best friend. How cute. Lucia felt her cheeks burn, but she kept walking. Sophia's steps slowed for a second, but Lucia nudged her to keep moving. Ignore her, Lucia whispered. They made it to their seats just as the bell rang, and Ms. Regina entered the classroom, her usual stiff posture making the room fall silent. Lucia focused on her notebook, doing her best to stay invisible. It was a coping mechanism she had learned over time. If no one noticed her, maybe they wouldn't bother her. Today, we'll continue our group projects, Ms. Regina announced. I expect more progress from each group. Remember, this project is a large part of your grade. Lucia's stomach twisted. She was stuck with Ana Clara and Jessica. The same dread she felt yesterday crept back in. Ms. Regina's gaze passed over her like she wasn't there, moving swiftly on to the other groups without a second glance. As the class shifted into their groups, Lucia walked slowly to Ana Clara and Jessica's table. Ana Clara was already complaining. I hate this project. It's so boring, Ana Clara whined, flipping her long brown hair over her shoulder. Let's just finish it quickly so we don't have to think about it anymore. Jessica nodded in agreement, looking to Lucia with a tired expression, as if the responsibility of the entire project already rested on her shoulders. Lucia, didn't you say you'd handle the writing? Ana Clara smirked, leaning back in her chair. You know, since you're so good at it. Lucia's jaw tightened. We're supposed to work together. I can write, but we should all contribute. Ana Clara exchanged a look with Jessica, rolling her eyes. Sure, whatever you say. Lucia opened her notebook, trying to focus, but the tension was palpable. Every word Ana Clara said dripped with condescension, making it impossible to concentrate. She could feel the familiar sting of frustration bubbling up inside her, but she pushed it down, determined not to let it show. Later that day, at recess, Lucia sat on a bench with Sophia, watching the other kids run around and play. Normally, she would have joined in, but lately, recess had become more of a time to retreat. It was easier to sit in the shade, away from the teasing and the cruel looks. Sophia shifted uncomfortably beside her, sensing Lucia's mood. Do you want to talk about it? She asked softly. Lucia shook her head, her eyes still on the playground. It's just Ana Clara. She won't leave me alone. I don't understand why she hates me so much. Sophia frowned, her brow furrowing. She's just jealous. You're smart, and you don't care about being popular like she does. That probably bothers her. Lucia bit her lip. It's more than that. It's like she enjoys making me feel small, like she thinks she's better than me. Sophia was quiet for a moment before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it's because you're different, and she doesn't like different. Lucia's heart clenched. She knew Sophia was right. It wasn't just about being smart or not caring about popularity. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't change, even if she wanted to. I just want her to stop, Lucia whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so tired of it. Sophia reached over and squeezed her hand, offering silent support. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything to Lucia. Back in class, the day dragged on. Every minute felt heavier than the last, and by the time the final bell rang, Lucia was exhausted. She gathered her things quickly, eager to escape. But before she could make it out the door, Ana Clara's voice stopped her in her tracks. Hey, Lucia, Ana Clara called, a sickly sweet tone coating her words. Don't forget to finish the project tonight. You're supposed to be the smart one, right? Lucia turned slowly, her fists clenched at her sides. She didn't want to engage, but she was tired. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt, tired of pretending it didn't matter. I'm not doing all the work, Lucia said, her voice low but firm. Ana Clara raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by Lucia's sudden defiance. Oh, and what are you going to do about it? Lucia hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to stand up for herself, to say something that would shut Ana Clara down for good, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned and walked out of the classroom, her hands shaking. Outside, Sophia was waiting for her, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? Lucia shook her head, her eyes burning with unshed tears. I can't do this anymore, Sophia. I can't keep letting her get to me. Sophia wrapped an arm around Lucia's shoulders, pulling her close. You're not alone, Lucia. I'm here, and you don't have to deal with her by yourself. For the first time that day, Lucia allowed herself to cry, the weight of everything finally crashing down on her. But as the tears fell, so did some of the fear. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. That evening, as Lucia sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, her mother noticed the change in her demeanor. Clarice had always been able to read Lucia like an open book, and tonight was no different. "What happened today, Lucia?" Clarice asked gently, sitting down across from her. Lucia sighed, dropping her pencil. "It's Anna Clara. She's making my life miserable." Clarice's expression softened with understanding. "Tell me what she's done." Lucia recounted the day's events, her voice thick with frustration. She told her mother about the group project, about Anna Clara's constant teasing, and about how Ms. Regina did nothing to stop it. When she finished, Clarice was quiet for a moment, thinking carefully about what to say. "Lucia, I know this is hard, but you can't let people like Anna Clara define you. They're trying to make you feel small because they see your strength, and it scares them. But what am I supposed to do?" Lucia asked, her voice tinged with hopelessness. "She's always going to be like this, and no one does anything about it." Clarice reached across the table, taking Lucia's hand. "You have to speak up, Lucia. You have to stand tall, even when it's hard. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way." Lucia nodded, though the weight of her mother's words still felt heavy. She wanted to be brave, but every day at school chipped away at her courage bit by bit. The next morning, Lucia walked into class with a renewed sense of determination. She had spent all night thinking about what her mother had said, and although she wasn't sure how, she knew she had to find her voice. As the class worked quietly on their projects, Anna Clara leaned over to Jessica, whispering something that made her laugh. Lucia's skin prickled, but she kept her focus on her notebook. She was not going to let them get to her. When the lunch bell rang, Lucia stood up to leave, but Anna Clara blocked her path. "So, did you finish the project?" Anna Clara asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Lucia clenched her fists at her sides. "No, we're supposed to do it together." Anna Clara rolled her eyes. "Oh please, like I'm going to rely on you. You'd probably just mess it up anyway." Lucia's heart pounded in her chest, the familiar rush of anger and hurt rising up inside her. But this time, she didn't back down. "I'm not going to let you talk to me like that anymore," Lucia said, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. "I'm tired of your games, Anna Clara. You don't get to treat me like I'm less than you." Anna Clara blinked, clearly taken aback by Lucia's sudden outburst. For a moment, she seemed unsure of what to say, but then a cold smirk spread across her face. "Wow, Lucia, who knew you had it in you?" Anna Clara sneered. "But guess what? No one cares what you think." Lucia felt the sting of those words, but she stood her ground. "I care, and that's enough." Without waiting for a response, Lucia pushed past Anna Clara and walked out of the classroom, her heart racing. She didn't know if things would change after this, but for the first time, she felt like she had taken a step in the right direction. As she met up with Sophia at lunch, Lucia couldn't help but smile, even if just a little. Maybe, just maybe, things would get better. The classroom buzzed with quiet chatter as the students gathered for their group activity. Lucia sat at her desk, her pencil tapping rhythmically against her notebook. Her mind was elsewhere, caught between the frustration of Anna Clara's constant jabs and the conversation she had with her mother the night before. "I need to speak up," she whispered to herself, though the thought made her heart race. Sophia sat beside her, already sensing Lucia's unease. "Are you okay?" Lucia glanced at her friend, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't. Lucia could feel the weight of Anna Clara's gaze from across the room, the anticipation of what snide remark would come next hanging over her like a cloud. Ms. Regina stood at the front of the class, oblivious as usual to the tension in the room, and Lucia's stomach twisted. Today felt like it was leading up to something, though she couldn't tell if it was good or bad. "All right, class," Ms. Regina's voice rang out, snapping everyone's attention to her. "It's time to present your group projects." Lucia's throat went dry. She glanced at Anna Clara and Jessica, who were sitting 2 rows ahead, already whispering to each other. There was no way this would go smoothly. "You'll be called up one by one," Ms. Regina continued. "Remember, this is a team effort, so everyone should participate." Ana Clara turned around just enough to give Lucia a smug look, her blue eyes glinting with something malicious. Lucia's heart pounded in her chest, but she squared her shoulders. She wasn't going to back down today. The first few groups presented their projects with ease, each group taking turns to explain their work. Lucia could barely focus, her nerves increasing with every passing minute. Finally, Ms. Regina called their names. Ana Clara, Jessica, and Lucia, your group is next. Lucia stood, her legs shaky as she followed Ana Clara and Jessica to the front of the room. The three of them stood before their classmates, the project poster board set on an easel behind them. Ana Clara immediately took the lead, her voice smooth and confident. So, we decided to focus on the impact of environmental changes on local wildlife, Ana Clara began, flashing a bright smile at the class. I did most of the research, and Jessica helped with the visuals. Lucia blinked, her mind scrambling. Most of the research? That was a lie. She had done the bulk of the work, spending hours at home gathering information and organizing the project. But now, standing there, Ana Clara was taking credit for it all. And Lucia? Ms. Regina asked, raising an eyebrow. What was your contribution? For a moment, Lucia stood frozen, her voice caught in her throat. She could feel Ana Clara's gaze on her, daring her to speak, daring her to challenge her version of events. Lucia's voice faltered, but she forced herself to continue. I did the research and helped with the writing. Ana Clara cut in smoothly. Oh, right. She helped a little with the writing, but it wasn't much. The class laughed softly, and Lucia's face burned. She could feel the humiliation crawling up her neck, tightening around her like a noose. Her fists clenched at her sides, and for a brief moment, she considered just walking out, escaping the classroom and the relentless mockery. But something in her snapped. That's not true. Lucia's voice rang out, louder than she intended. The room fell silent. Ms. Regina blinked in surprise, her hand pausing mid-note. I did most of the work, Lucia continued, her voice trembling but determined. Ana Clara barely did anything. She's lying. Ana Clara's eyes widened, the shock of being called out in front of everyone clearly rattling her. But she quickly recovered, her lips curling into a sneer. Oh, please, Lucia. Don't be so dramatic. Everyone knows you're just trying to get attention. Lucia's chest tightened. She could feel the stares of her classmates, the whispers already starting up again. But she couldn't stop now. Not after everything she had endured. I'm not being dramatic, Lucia said, her voice firmer now. I'm tired of you lying. I'm tired of you making fun of me. You've been doing it all year, and I'm done. The air in the room shifted. Even Ms. Regina, who had been watching the exchange with mild disinterest, seemed taken aback by the sudden confrontation. Lucia, Ms. Regina began cautiously, this isn't the time. No, Lucia interrupted, her gaze never leaving Ana Clara's. It is the time. You let her get away with it, Ms. Regina. Every time she makes fun of me or says something mean, you do nothing. Ms. Regina stiffened, her expression unreadable. Lucia, that's enough. But Lucia wasn't finished. She couldn't stop now. The words were spilling out, years of hurt and frustration finally bubbling to the surface. No, it's not enough, Lucia said, her voice shaking with emotion. You let her make fun of my hair, my skin, and you never say anything. You act like it's not happening, but it is. Every day. And I'm tired of pretending like it doesn't hurt. The room was deathly quiet. Ana Clara stood frozen, her usual confidence shaken. For the first time, she looked small, unsure. Ms. Regina cleared her throat, her face pale. Lucia, I wasn't aware. You were, Lucia cut her off. You just didn't care. Ms. Regina opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. The silence stretched on, suffocating the room. Lucia's hands trembled, but she didn't back down. I'm not asking for special treatment. I just want you to treat me like everyone else. I want you to see me. For the first time, Ms. Regina looked uncomfortable, her gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't realize you felt that way, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Ana Clara stood there, still shocked into silence. Jessica shifted awkwardly beside her, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I think we're done here, Lucia said softly, stepping away from the front of the class. Her heart pounded in her chest, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt powerful. At lunch, Lucia sat beside Sophia, who hadn't said a word since the confrontation. She looked at Lucia with wide eyes, her admiration clear. I can't believe you said all that, Sophia whispered, glancing around the cafeteria nervously. Are you okay? Lucia nodded slowly, still processing everything that had happened. I think so. I couldn't take it anymore. Sophia smiled softly. I'm proud of you. Lucia smiled back, though a part of her still felt raw, exposed. It was one thing to speak up, but now she had to live with the consequences of it. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, the whispered conversations that were undoubtedly about her. But for once, she didn't care. Not as much, anyway. I don't know what's going to happen next, Lucia admitted, her voice quieter now. But I'm glad I said it. Sophia nodded, her hand resting gently on Lucia's. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The two sat in silence for a while, the weight of the day settling over them. But in that silence, there was something else, a sense of solidarity, of hope. Later that day, as Lucia was leaving school, Ms. Regina caught up to her at the gate. Her face was still tight with the tension of the earlier events, but there was something softer in her eyes now. Lucia, Ms. Regina called, her voice uncertain. Lucia stopped, turning slowly to face her teacher. Yes? Ms. Regina sighed, running a hand through her hair. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. Lucia blinked, unsure how to respond. It wasn't the apology she had expected, if she had expected one at all. I'll do better, Ms. Regina continued, her voice low but sincere. I promise. Lucia studied her teacher for a moment, searching for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was regret. Thank you, Lucia said quietly. She wasn't ready to forgive Ms. Regina just yet, but this was a start. Ms. Regina nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I'll see you tomorrow, Lucia. As Ms. Regina walked away, Lucia stood there for a moment, letting the cool afternoon breeze wash over her. The knot in her chest that had been there for so long was starting to loosen. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but for the first time in a long time, Lucia felt hopeful. The next morning, Lucia walked into school with her head held high, but her stomach churned with anxiety. She had spoken her truth yesterday, but the reality of it was sinking in. Today, she would face the aftermath. As she entered the classroom, a few students glanced her way before quickly looking away. The whispers were faint but persistent. Lucia's heart pounded in her chest, but she reminded herself of her mother's words. You're strong. You're not alone. Sophia, as always, was waiting for her at their usual spot. You okay? She asked gently, her eyes full of concern. Lucia nodded, forcing a small smile. I'll be fine. Ms. Regina walked in moments later, her face unusually tense. She began the class without much of a greeting, diving directly into the lesson plan. Lucia could sense the unease in the room. The tension from yesterday lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Even Ana Clara, who usually thrived in the center of attention, sat quietly in her seat, her usual smug smile nowhere to be found. It wasn't until recess that things began to unravel. Lucia and Sophia were sitting under their usual tree when Ana Clara and her group approached. Lucia braced herself. She had known this was coming. Well, if it isn't Lucia, our class's new star, Ana Clara sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Lucia looked up, meeting Ana Clara's gaze. She felt the knot of fear in her chest tighten, but didn't look away. What do you want, Ana? Sophia asked, her voice surprisingly firm. Ana Clara rolled her eyes. Oh, I just wanted to congratulate Lucia. It's not every day someone has the guts to stand up and embarrass themselves in front of the whole class. The words stung, but Lucia kept her face steady. I didn't embarrass myself, she said quietly, but firmly. I told the truth. Ana Clara snorted, her friends giggling beside her. The truth? Please, you think anyone actually cares about your little speech? You're still just— Ana Clara stopped herself, her eyes narrowing in anger, but she didn't finish the sentence. Lucia stood up slowly, her heart racing. I am what? She asked, her voice steady but filled with emotion. For a moment, Ana Clara looked unsure, caught between her usual confidence and the realization that the balance had shifted. But then her arrogance returned. You're still nobody, Lucia, she spat. You'll always be nobody. Lucia's chest tightened, but this time, something inside her refused to give in. She looked at Ana Clara, really looked at her, and saw someone desperate for control, desperate to feel superior. You know what, Ana Clara? Lucia's voice was calm, but powerful. You can keep trying to make me feel small, but it won't work anymore. I'm not afraid of you. The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a brief moment, the group stood frozen. Then, without another word, Ana Clara turned and stormed off, her friends trailing behind her. Sophia looked at Lucia, her eyes wide with admiration. That was incredible. Lucia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I didn't know if I could do it, she admitted, sitting back down. Sophia smiled softly. But you did. Later that day, in the classroom, the atmosphere remained thick with tension. Lucia could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but she held her head high, determined not to show any sign of weakness. Ms. Regina stood at the front of the class, looking more uncomfortable than usual. As she handed out assignments, she paused by Lucia's desk. Lucia, she said quietly, so only Lucia could hear, could I speak to you after class? Lucia nodded, her stomach doing somersaults. What could Ms. Regina possibly want now? The rest of the day dragged on, each minute feeling longer than the last. When the final bell rang, Lucia watched as her classmates filed out, some casting curious glances her way. Sophia gave her an encouraging smile before leaving the room, and then it was just her and Ms. Regina. Ms. Regina sat down at her desk, motioning for Lucia to sit across from her. For a moment, the teacher seemed to struggle with her words. I want to apologize, Ms. Regina began, her voice soft but sincere. I didn't realize how much you've been going through. I should have paid more attention. I should have done something sooner. Lucia looked down at her hands, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her sweater. She wasn't sure what to say. Part of her was still angry, but another part of her felt a strange sense of relief. At least Ms. Regina was acknowledging the truth now. I'm going to do better, Ms. Regina continued, her eyes filled with regret. I promise you that things will change. I'll make sure of it. Lucia met her teacher's gaze, searching for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was genuine remorse. Thank you, Lucia said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope things will change. Ms. Regina nodded, a small, sad smile tugging at her lips. They will. That evening, as Lucia sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, her mother walked in, her face filled with the usual warmth but also concern. How was school today, Querida? Clarice asked, sitting down beside her. Lucia sighed, setting her pencil down. It was different. Ms. Regina apologized. Clarice raised an eyebrow, her surprise evident. She did? Well, that's a start. Lucia nodded, still unsure how she felt about it all. I think she's really going to try to change things. But it's hard to believe after everything. Her mother reached out, gently squeezing her hand. It's okay to feel that way. Trust is earned, not given. But I'm proud of you, Lucia. You've been so strong through all of this. Tears pricked at Lucia's eyes, but she blinked them away. I don't feel strong. Clarice smiled softly. Strength isn't about not feeling afraid or hurt. It's about standing tall, even when you are. Lucia looked at her mother, the warmth of her words sinking in. I just want things to be better. They will be, Clarice said, her voice firm but loving. Because you're not just waiting for things to change. You're making them change. Lucia smiled, a small but genuine smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. The next few days at school passed with an odd quietness. Ana Clara kept her distance, and while some students still whispered behind Lucia's back, the cruel comments had lessened. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Sophia had become an even closer friend, always by Lucia's side, offering support when needed and silence when words weren't enough. The two of them often sat together at lunch, enjoying their quiet moments away from the noise of the schoolyard. But the real shift came when Ms. Regina started making changes. She began incorporating discussions about respect and kindness into her lessons. She no longer ignored the small cruelties that had once gone unnoticed. And though it would take time for the entire class to change, Lucia could feel the difference. One afternoon, Ms. Regina announced that the class would be starting a project on diversity and inclusion. Lucia's heart skipped a beat at the irony of it all, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Maybe, just maybe, her voice had made a difference. As the students gathered into groups for the project, Lucia and Sophia worked together, their ideas flowing easily as they talked about the importance of empathy and understanding. It felt good to be part of something that mattered, something that could help others see the world in a new way. By the time the project was presented, Lucia felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. As she stood at the front of the class with Sophia, explaining their ideas about inclusion, she noticed Ms. Regina watching her with a look of quiet pride. And when the presentation was over, there was no mocking laughter, no cruel comments. Instead, there was quiet applause. For the first time, Lucia felt seen. As the school year went on, things slowly began to improve. Ana Clara still avoided Lucia, but the sharp edges of their encounters had dulled. Ms. Regina continued to make small changes in the classroom, and Lucia felt more at ease with each passing day. One afternoon, as Lucia packed up her things at the end of the day, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Hey, Lucia." She turned to see Ana Clara standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. I wanted to say I'm sorry," Ana Clara mumbled, her eyes fixed on the floor. "For everything." Lucia blinked in surprise. It was the last thing she had expected to hear. "Why now?" she asked, her voice cautious. Ana Clara shifted awkwardly, still not meeting Lucia's gaze. "I don't know. I guess I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. And after what you said, I've been thinking about it a lot." Lucia studied her, searching for any hint of insincerity. But Ana Clara's voice was soft, and for the first time, she seemed genuine. "I appreciate the apology," Lucia said carefully, "but it's going to take time for me to trust that you've really changed." Ana Clara nodded quickly, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I understand. I'll try to do better." As Ana Clara walked away, Lucia felt a strange mix of emotions. She didn't know if she could ever forgive Ana Clara completely, but for now, this was enough. She had spoken her truth, and slowly, things were changing. The end of the school year was approaching, and the atmosphere was heavy with both excitement and tension. Lucia sat at her desk, staring at the clock, waiting for the final bell to ring. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the year was almost over, but also apprehension about what came next. Things had changed, but not entirely. Ana Clara had kept her distance since their last encounter, and Ms. Regina had been making an effort to create a more inclusive environment. Yet, the scars of the past few months still lingered. Lucia glanced over at Sophia, who was quietly scribbling in her notebook beside her. The two had grown even closer, and Lucia was grateful for her friendship. But there was something else weighing on her mind, something that had been gnawing at her ever since Ana Clara's apology. Was it possible to forgive? The question haunted her, and every time she thought about Ana Clara's face, about the hurtful things she had said and done, Lucia felt a rush of anger, followed by guilt. Could she ever really let it go? The bell finally rang, snapping Lucia out of her thoughts. The classroom erupted in noise as students began packing their bags and chatting excitedly about their summer plans. Ms. Regina called for order, reminding them of their final project presentations next week before dismissing them. As Lucia gathered her things, she noticed Ana Clara standing near the door, hesitating as if she wanted to say something. Their eyes met briefly, but Ana Clara quickly looked away and disappeared into the hallway. Lucia sighed, feeling the weight of unspoken words between them. That evening, at home, Lucia sat on the couch with her mother, flipping through a sketchbook full of her drawings. Clarice watched her daughter carefully, sensing that something was bothering her. "Lucia, Is everything okay? Clarice asked gently, setting her cup of tea down on the table. Lucia didn't look up, her fingers tracing the edges of a drawing she had made of a tree in their backyard. I don't know, she admitted, her voice soft. Her mother waited patiently, knowing that Lucia would speak when she was ready. I've been thinking a lot about Ana Clara, Lucia finally said. About what she did, and her apology. Clarice nodded slowly, understanding where this was going. And how do you feel about it? I don't know, Lucia repeated, her brow furrowing. I'm still angry, but at the same time, I don't want to be angry forever. Does that make sense? Her mother smiled gently. It makes perfect sense, Querida. Forgiveness isn't easy, especially when someone has hurt you deeply. It's okay to feel conflicted. Lucia sighed, closing the sketchbook and leaning back against the couch. I just don't know if I can ever forgive her. But I don't want to carry this with me anymore. Clarice took her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened, or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about finding peace for yourself. Sometimes, forgiving someone is more about letting go of the pain they caused you, so you can move forward. Lucia looked down at their hands, her mind racing. Could she really let go of the hurt? Could she find peace, even if things would never be the same with Ana Clara? I guess I can try, Lucia said quietly, though the doubt still lingered in her heart. Her mother smiled, brushing a hand over Lucia's hair. That's all anyone can do. The next day at school, Lucia found herself sitting alone in the art room during lunch. She had needed some space to think, and the quiet hum of the room was comforting. She was working on a new drawing, a portrait of a girl with wild, curly hair, her face fierce and proud. Lucia hadn't realized it until now, but she had drawn herself. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear someone approach until a voice broke the silence. Lucia? Lucia looked up, startled, and saw Ana Clara standing hesitantly in the doorway. Her usual confidence was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she looked unsure, almost nervous. What are you doing here? Lucia asked, her tone not unkind but cautious. Ana Clara shifted awkwardly, wringing her hands. I wanted to talk to you. About what I said before. Lucia stared at her, unsure of what to say. Ana Clara took a deep breath and continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I hurt you. I know that I was cruel, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I really am sorry. Lucia felt her chest tighten, the anger she had been holding onto for so long bubbling up again. But she didn't say anything. She just waited, letting Ana Clara speak. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I made you feel, Ana Clara went on, her voice shaky. And I guess I never realized how much my words could hurt. I thought it was just teasing, but I was wrong. And I'm sorry. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and full of unspoken emotions. Lucia didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to accept the apology, to let it all go. But another part of her, the part that still felt the sting of Ana Clara's words, wasn't ready. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Lucia said honestly, her voice quiet but steady. But I'm glad you apologized. Ana Clara nodded quickly, her relief evident. That's okay. I understand. I wanted you to know. For the first time in months, Lucia saw something genuine in Ana Clara's eyes, something vulnerable. It was strange, seeing her like this, without the mask of arrogance or cruelty. I'm trying to be better, Ana Clara added softly, almost to herself. I really am. Lucia nodded, though she still felt uncertain. I hope you are. As Ana Clara turned to leave, she paused at the door. You're a really good artist, Lucia, she said quietly before walking out. Lucia stared after her, the weight of their conversation settling over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't sure what to make of Ana Clara's apology, but for now, it was enough. That afternoon, as Lucia walked home from school with Sophia, she told her about the conversation with Ana Clara. Do you think she really meant it? Sophia asked, her brow furrowed in thought. I think so, Lucia replied, though her voice was still filled with uncertainty. But it's hard to know for sure. Sophia nodded. People can change, but it takes time. Lucia smiled at her friend, grateful for her support. Yeah, time. As they walked, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the quiet street. Lucia felt a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't complete. There were still things left unresolved, feelings she needed to work through, but for the first time, she felt like she was moving forward. The final project presentations came and went, and soon, it was the last day of school. Lucia sat in her seat, listening as Ms. Regina gave her final remarks. The year had been full of challenges, but it had also been full of growth. Lucia felt stronger now, more sure of who she was and what she was capable of. When the bell rang for the last time, there was a flurry of excitement as students rushed to gather their things and say goodbye to friends. Lucia lingered at her desk for a moment, taking it all in. Sophia came over, her eyes shining with excitement. "We made it!" she exclaimed, her grin wide. Lucia laughed, the sound light and free. "We did." As they walked out of the classroom together, Lucia glanced back one last time. Ms. Regina was watching her, a small smile on her face. Lucia smiled back, grateful for the changes that had taken place, both in herself and in the people around her. Stepping into the sunlight, Lucia felt the warmth of the day on her skin, the future stretching out before her, full of possibility. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting golden hues over the quiet street as Lucia walked home from school. The final bell had rung not just for the day, but for the year. Her heart felt heavy, not with sadness, but with the weight of everything she had been through. The trials, the victories, and the slow but meaningful change that had taken root in her life. As she approached her house, she saw her mother waiting on the porch, her arms folded but her expression warm. "How does it feel to be done with the school year?" Clarice asked with a smile, motioning for Lucia to sit beside her. Lucia hesitated, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "It feels strange. Good, I think, but different." She dropped her bag on the porch and sat down, leaning into her mother's side. Clarice wrapped an arm around her, resting her chin on Lucia's head. "That's because you've grown so much, Querida. This year was a hard one, but look at how strong you've become." Lucia smiled softly, though her thoughts were still tangled. "Do you think people really change, May?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clarice looked at her daughter for a moment before answering. "I think people can change if they want to, but it takes time, and sometimes it's harder than we realize." Lucia nodded, thinking back to everything that had happened with Ana Clara. The apology had been real, but there was still a part of Lucia that didn't know if she could truly forgive. Was it enough to say sorry when the hurt still lingered? The next morning, Lucia woke up to a quieter world. No rush to get ready for school, no lingering anxiety about facing her classmates. It was the first day of summer, and yet, there was still a sense of unfinished business. As she ate breakfast, Lucia's thoughts drifted to Ms. Regina. Their relationship had shifted. What once was cold and distant had grown warmer, even respectful. But the memory of those early months, when Lucia felt invisible, still stung. "I think I want to talk to Ms. Regina," Lucia said aloud, her fork hovering over her plate. Her mother, who had been reading the newspaper, looked up in surprise. "What do you mean, Querida?" "I don't know," Lucia admitted, setting her fork down. "I just feel like there are things I need to say to her before I can really move on." Clarice nodded thoughtfully. "That's very brave of you. If you think it will help, I support you." Lucia smiled, feeling a sense of determination build inside her. She had faced so much this year. What was one more conversation? A few days later, Lucia found herself standing outside the school office. The halls were empty, echoing with memories of a year that felt both long and fleeting. She had arranged to meet Ms. Regina here, hoping for a moment of closure. Ms. Regina appeared, her usual composed demeanor in place, but there was something softer in her eyes now, an openness that hadn't been there before. "Lucia," Ms. Regina greeted her, offering a small smile. "It's good to see you. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon after the year ended." Lucia nodded, her hands fidgeting slightly. I needed to talk to you about everything that happened." Ms. Regina's smile faltered slightly, and she motioned for Lucia to sit. Of course. I'm listening. For a moment, Lucia didn't know where to start. But then, the words began to spill out. Everything she had felt, from the isolation and the hurt to the moments of triumph. She talked about Ana Clara's cruelty, about feeling invisible in class, and about the weight of being treated differently because of her skin.